everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be chatting about my April wrap-up. So in the month of April I managed to read 6 books, which I was really pleased about, or at least finish 6 books. I had started reading them before April, some of them. The first thing that I read was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste, or I should say the first thing I finished. And I buddy read this with my mum. Little Fires Everywhere follows 2 families. It follows the Richardson family, which consists of mum, dad and 4 children. And it also follows Mia and Pearl, who Mia is a single mother, a young single mother, and Pearl is her daughter. And Mia and Pearl become tenants of the Richardson family. And both families kind of start to intermingle together, and good and bad comes out of that. This book actually begins at the end. It begins with the Richardson's family house burning to the ground. So you kind of meet Mrs. Richardson as she's standing outside the house. A few of her children are there and they're like, what on earth is happening? Our house is burned down. And you know that Pearl and Mia have just left their keys behind for the house or the apartment they've been renting from the Richardsons, and they've gone. And that's kind of all you know. So you don't know who has done it, what's happened, what on earth is going on, and so this book is kind of a mystery as well. One of the big storylines in this book is to do with a court case that happens about the adoption of a Chinese American baby, and Mrs. Richardson and Mia end up on opposite sides of this court case, and so that leads to some interesting scenarios, shall we say. I really enjoyed the writing style of this book. I found it was like very kind of conversational, and there were a lot of asides that were included, so you kind of got both sides of the story as you went along, which I thought was quite nice. I did find as I continued to read, I kind of forgot about the mystery in the beginning and just was like enjoying finding out about the characters' lives and things that had happened to them and things that was going on underneath the surface of what everybody else in the town could see. Yeah, so the mystery was kind of lost on me a little bit. I did kind of find that Ing would like reveal something about character that you'd find really interesting and you would want to know about, but then she'd take you right back and tell you the whole history of it. And I found that didn't kind of propel me through reading this book, because you already know what the consequence of the story she's telling you is. And for me personally, I just found that kind of made me lose a little bit of interest in what I was reading, because I knew what the outcome was going to be. But I have to say, with the story of the court case, towards the end, I really did get like really into it, and I ended up hating one of the characters, which I think is a good sign. Having so much emotion for one person, I wanted to like throw the book at one point because I was just so frustrated. And it was really fun to kind of chat with my mum when we were buddy reading it and try and come up with theories and everything. I also found that it was a really thought-provoking book, and it did make me think about issues surrounding race and kind of poorer communities and richer communities that I'd never really considered before. So that I found was a really good thing. It made me really think about things in a different way. I can't discuss too much detail because I don't want to give things away. So yeah, overall, mystery-wise, I didn't really rate it. I kind of lost interest in the mystery a little bit by the end, but the character development was really good. I really got into the family life and was pretty invested at the end. And in the end, I gave this 3.5 stars. Okay, so the next book that I finished in April was one that I started reading in October with my boyfriend, so like a really long time ago, and that was A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. This is the first in the Darker Shade of Magic's trilogy, I think it's called. And this book is set in a really cool kind of fantasy land. You've got 4 different worlds that are all kind of stacked on top of each other and linked through their capital city of London. And the 4 different Londons have varying levels of magic within them. So there's Grey London, which is like our London, which has barely any magic at all that anybody knows of. Red London, which is more magical, and White London and Black London. I feel like it goes up increasingly with magical powers that way, but I might have got that a bit wrong. You mainly follow Kel, who is an Antari, and he is from Red London, and he's like the adoptive son of the royal family there. And it's his job to kind of move between the worlds, because only Antari can move between these Londons and actually go and visit these other places. He's quite bad, and he like goes to all these places and takes little trinkets just to kind of collect or to trade with, that he's not supposed to do. You're not supposed to bring things between the worlds, but he does it anyway. And then one day he ends up with this thing he shouldn't have, and he kind of goes into grey London and bumps into Leela, who is the other main character of this book. And Leela is from our kind of world, but it's not like modern day our kind of world. I feel like it's, I don't know when it was set, but like I feel like it's oldie worldy London. She kind of half lives on the streets and half doesn't live on the streets, but she's a thief and she's very vicious and she knows how to look after herself. And her and Curl kind of bump into each other, and they end up on this quest trying to get rid of this thing that he's acquired that he shouldn't have. Yeah, so I really like the idea and the premise. I just didn't get on necessarily with the writing style that well. It wasn't necessarily the writing style, like the short, sharp sentences, like, or anything like that bothered me. It was more that every tiny little detail was described, so I felt like when we were reading it, we felt like nothing was left to the imagination and everything was spelled out, which kind of got a little bit tedious. She does use like italics in the text as well, just to emphasize things, which didn't actually bother me too much, but I know that some people do find it annoying, so I just thought I'd mention it. The fact that we took such a long time to read it could have just completely dampened my feelings to the plot and feeling a bit underwhelmed by the plot. So it might not be that everything was like completely over explained or anything like that. It might just be the fact that we took such a slow time to read it. But then on the other hand, we were never really compelled to pick it up to see what was going to happen. And we both kind of found the ending pretty anticlimactic. We kind of thought it was an okay read. I do want to pick up the second one because I do really love the idea of the world and etc. And I kind of hope that I get on with the second one a bit better if I read it quicker and kind of give it a bit more of a chance than maybe we gave this one. In the end, I gave this 3 stars, but I do want to continue the series. I don't just want to leave it there. Okay, and then the next book that I picked up, or that I was continuing reading from last month, was The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, and I absolutely love this book. This was my favourite book to read of the whole month. The main thing that I really liked about this book was her writing style. I just felt like it was so magical and it really just took you into the story. It took me into the story and I just felt like I was a child again, basically, reading this book. It made me feel so cozy and like full of wonder, and I really like that about this. I haven't felt like that for a long time reading a book. So you're basically following Zachary, and he's this young lad doing a master's in kind of video games. I think he does like looking at gender within the games. Within the video game industry or something like that. He's writing his master's thesis on. He's quite a shy guy. He like spends a lot of time on his own reading, so he likes to go to the university library and go and pick out a whole bunch of books and read them. And then one day he goes and he finds this very nondescript book, picks it up to read it, and it's full of like little short stories, and one of the short stories that he reads is a story about him, and he's like, wait, what? It really freaks him out. So he kind of like takes it upon himself to try and dig deep and find more information about this. Who's written this story? How did they know about the thing that happened to him? How was it written in this old looking book? And you kind of just follow him as he goes on this adventure, trying to find out what on earth is going on. One of the things I really liked about the writing style was that it did remind me of those video games that you play, you know, when you're kind of like an adventure game where you're the point of view character and you go along and you go into a room and you collect all the items, and then you look at the items and you think, okay, what does this mean? Oh, I should go through that door, or how do I get through this door? And it was kind of written a little bit like that, which I really liked because I really like those kind of games as well. Throughout the whole story, Morgenstern kind of feeds you this information about this world and tells you all these stories, because this book is like 5 books within this book. So the books that Zachary reads, you kind of read alongside him, which I really liked. I've never read a book like that before. I know that's not necessarily like a new thing, but for me it was a new thing. You have to get about halfway through before things start piecing together and you start understanding how everything joins together. And I found that was really satisfying when things started all coming together and the world was just kind of opening up a lot more. I would say that it's not necessarily logical answers. You really have to suspend your disbelief in this book and just go with the flow with it otherwise. And if you don't like kind of magical, whimsical writing or just nonsense, probably not going to get on with this very well. But like for me personally, I just really loved reading something where things didn't have to make complete sense and you could just, I just absolutely loved the worlds that she created, and I loved being there. There really wasn't much I didn't like about this book. I can see kind of at the end, I feel like either I missed clues along the way or we didn't get all the answers at the end. Which I've seen like from a few reviews, a lot of people found it frustrating because they were still confused at the end. And I totally get it because I too was confused a little bit at the end. So at some point I do really want to reread it and see if I can piece it together, or if maybe that was the point and it was supposed to be left that you don't completely understand everything. But also it kind of set up for a sequel as well. So I really hope that like there is one, because I know it got such bad reviews in from a lot of people. So I really hope that doesn't mean that there's not a second one, but it might mean that. It can come as no surprise to anyone that I ended up giving this 5 stars. Okay, so now on to the Owls and TBRClearOut readathon. So I ended up reading these 3 for my Owls because I wanted to become an astronomer. I read Miniaturist for Arithmancy as a book that's outside of my comfort zone. I read Colour of Magic by Terry Pratchett for History of Magic, which was to read a book about witches and wizards. And I read Einstein's Dreams by Alan Lightman for the Astronomy Owl, which was to read a book completely at night time. So these are all books that I've had on my TBR for a really long time. And I enjoyed all of them, so I'm pleased that I read them. The other thing that I was reading for this was Aliens, and this was actually the first book that I picked up. And I'm almost kind of towards the end. But I'm really enjoying this as well. I've got some video ideas that I want to do for this book, so I'm going to talk about it in another video, I think later on in the month. So hopefully you guys will enjoy that. And I also kind of partook in last weekend, the last readathon weekend, which is a new 24-hour readathon in 48 hours that is run by Hannah from Handpicked Blog. And for that I was trying to read the Riddle of the Labyrinth in 2 days. I flagged a bit on the Sunday, I will have to admit, so I didn't complete it, but I'm still reading it. I've got my pen in there because I'm actually writing this book. I ended up reading this much of the book, and I also kind of was finishing up reading The Miniaturist as well. So I really enjoyed that. It was really nice to kind of just spend a couple of days mostly reading. That was really nice, and kind of chilling out. So do check out Hannah's channel if you wanted to join in next month, because it's going to happen at the end of every month, as far as I'm aware. Really enjoying this book. This is so interesting. This book is about the decipherment of Linear B, which was a script written on these tablets that were dug up in Crete in 1900, and it took 50 years to decipher what was on these tablets, what language was written on these tablets. And yeah, it's really, really interesting. I didn't know anything about this subject or much about archaeology or anything, so it's been a really interesting read, and I will definitely talk to you more about this in another video at some point. Okay, so on with the rest. The Miniaturist, really, really loved this book by Jessie Burton, and I ended up buddy reading this with my mum as well, which I have to say is really good for propelling me on to read, because she reads a lot quicker than I do. So she often was like going ahead a bit, so I'd have to read more, but at least it propelled me to keep reading. Anyway, so this book follows a young girl called Nella who is 18, and she lives in this kind of rural farm town in the Netherlands. And her father has passed away and left her family in lots of debt, so she is very quickly married off to a rich merchant who lives in Amsterdam. His name's Johannes. Anyway, so it's a bit of a rushed wedding, and when she moves down to Amsterdam, she gets to the house and he's not there and his sister's there, and these 2 servants, Cornelia and Otto, greet her, and they're very strange with her. They don't kind of treat her like the new mistress of the house. They're quite patronising to her a little bit, and she just gets these really weird vibes off them, especially Cornelia and the sister. Anyway, so the husband basically doesn't pay much attention to her, and she is really upset about this because even though she's apprehensive, she's looking forward to finding out what it is to be a wife and to have children and to do the wifely duties and all of that. And she's kind of being denied them, so she starts to feel really lonely. So Johannes, her husband, buys her as a wedding gift this doll's house to kind of keep her preoccupied. And she's pretty insulted, to be honest, at first. So she ends up finding this miniaturist who can make little things for the house, and she orders a bunch of stuff, and then she kind of gets more than she's asked for. And that's all I really want to say about this, because this is a mystery that I loved. Like, I really enjoyed talking to my mum about this and coming up with theories way more than I did Little Fires Everywhere. We just found it so intriguing. We just wanted to know what happened next all the time. And yeah, it was really fun to kind of try and piece together. And even at the end, so this book starts out at the end as well. So there's a scene where you're at a funeral, and obviously you don't know whose funeral it is. And even when we got pretty close to the end, I had a whole conversation with my mum about that beginning bit again, once we knew all of the characters and had loads of clues, and then we still got it wrong, even though we went through it again. It was quite bad. We were bad detectives. So it's set in 1600s Amsterdam, which I found really interesting because I didn't know anything about that kind of time period or anything about the Netherlands really, or Amsterdam. So it was quite interesting to read about that part of time. And there was a lot of discussion about the ways Amsterdam was run at that time. It's difficult to talk about the discussions in this book without giving anything away, so I'm gonna just not talk about it. But there are some interesting topics in here, let's just say. The only kind of negative thing I could think to say about this book, which I don't know if it really is a negative thing, but the way that the characters kind of talk to each other, it does feel very modern. So aside from the setting and everything, the way everybody interacts with each other, you don't feel like you're not in modern day London. Which might not be completely fair because I don't know how people spoke to each other in the late 1600s. So maybe they did just talk like this, I don't know. It did feel, that was the only real thing that me and my mum said at the beginning. It took a while. It was easy to get into it, but then it was kind of, it did feel very modern, basically. And during the main bulk of it, it wasn't like completely gripping as it was at the end, if you know what I mean. But I guess a lot of books are like that. You're kind of plodding through life and trying to work out what's going on, and it was really confusing. But then the end really picked up and brought it all together, which I thought was really good. So anyway, I'm really pleased that we read this, and that I got it off my TBR. I've had it for a long time, and that I enjoyed it. So in the end, I ended up giving this 4 stars, and I definitely want to pick up more of Jessie Burton's books in the future. Okay, so then I finished The Colour of Magic. This I really liked as well. It was really good. So this is the first book in the Discworld series written by Terry Pratchett, and the first of the books that I have ever read. And in this book, you follow 2 characters mainly. So you follow Rincewind, who's this wizard who failed wizard school. He's this very nervous character and basically scared of everything. And you follow Twoflower, who is the first tourist to ever come into Rincewind's hometown, who is completely in awe of everything and just isn't scared of anything. He's the complete opposite of Rincewind, basically. And Rincewind ends up kind of being forced to protect Twoflower and look after him. And he ends up on this quest of doing this and hating most of the minutes of it. So with Twoflower, he's got this like chest here that has these little legs, and it's the most vicious chest you will ever encounter. And it's basically sworn or been enchanted to follow Twoflower anywhere. And yeah, he's a pretty violent little thing. This book I thought was just such a nice joy to read. I wasn't always in the mood for it, so I didn't read it particularly fast, but it was really clever. I just really liked Terry Pratchett's writing, and I thought it was really clever how he kind of took science from our world and twisted it and forced it into their magic system. That was really nice. There was lots of cool sciencey things in there. And he has this, I don't know if I'm saying this right because I'm really bad at explaining things and not very good with words, but he didn't just put anything on a plate like the Schwab did in A Darker Shade of Magic a little bit. But you learn about how characters feel about certain things by the actions of other people, if that makes any sense. He doesn't just blatantly say things, he kind of disguises it within the text and you work it out yourself. And that I thought was really clever as well. I really liked that. It was just really comical. And yeah, I loved it. So I can't wait to pick up the next one. You don't have to read these in order, but I'm going to read them in order because that's the type of person I am. Yeah, so in the end, I ended up giving this 4 stars as well. And the final book I read was Einstein's Dreams, or the final book I finished, I should say, right at the last second for my owls, was Einstein's Dreams by Alan Lightman. So I actually did a bit of googling of Alan Lightman because I didn't know who he was, and he's a writer and a physicist. I think he still works at MIT. This book was written in 1990, so it's a little bit old now. But according to Wikipedia, Alan Lightman was one of the first people to have faculty positions in both the sciences department and the humanities department. And I think that really sums this book up, because what it is it's imagining Albert Einstein when he was working at a patent office in Switzerland, coming up with this special theory of relativity. And it's imaginings of his thought processes while he was thinking about the nature of time. So within this book, each chapter, it's not even a chapter, it's like 4 pages long, so they're really, really short snippets of just kind of different scenarios of the way time could move. So that's a really bad explanation, I'll give you some examples. So like one of the little snippets imagines a world, what if humans could live forever? Another one would be, what if time actually moves backwards? How would that affect the people in the town of Burton in Switzerland? And one of my favourite ones was actually, okay, well, what if time doesn't just move completely smoothly? What if it's like jolts and you get a glimpse of the future every now and then? How would that affect people? So it was really considering the different scenarios and how it would specifically affect the people of Burton, which I found a really nice way of doing it actually. And I feel like this book would make a really great like buddy read or book group read, because they're really interesting like concepts, and I really feel frustrated that I chose this book to read as the astronomy pick, where I was only reading it at night, because when I was reading it I was really tired and I didn't quite get everything or like understand what he was trying to say. Sometimes because I was too tired to understand, but also sometimes because I didn't actually agree with what he was saying, which is why I think this would make a really good discussion book, because there's lots to talk about in here. Even from the fact that this is quite limiting, like it only looks at one specific kind of type of community, whereas if you think about time and all these different scenarios, how would it affect people all over the world? Like what would actually happen? And like, do you think that he's actually right in what he says? So really, really interesting, which kind of makes me want to read it again when I'm not half asleep. So I should have broken the rules and just not done it, but I'm a stickler for the rules, so I kept at it. And one of the other things I would quickly say about this book is that it's pretty bleak. It's pretty depressing at times. That a lot of the conclusions he comes to at the end of each scenario is a sad one. So you are left a lot of the time very bleak and a bit sad, which is also why reading it at night maybe wasn't the best idea, because I'd just be like, oh, okay, now I have to go to sleep. I did give it a 3-star, but maybe I should bump it up a little bit. I'll reread it one day and see what I think about it then. Okay, so that is everything that I read in April, which I was really pleased with. I'll be carrying these guys over into May along with my May TBR, which I'll link down below if you wanted to check it out. And yeah, so I hope you guys had a really good reading month in April. If you want to, let me know what your favourite book you read in April was, and I hope everyone is having a really nice May so far. Let's hope May is a bit more positive than April was worldwide. Okay, take care guys, thank you very much for watching, bye.